What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the shop. I really appreciate you tuning in today. Today we are working on the Curtis Falcon. Now, the Curtis Falcon has been seeing a lot of attention with my spare time here and there. I've got other things going on in the background, so please be patient. But I'll get to the upground on the Falcon in a bit. The first thing we're going to be doing is working on essentially the anatomy, understanding the anatomy of a biplane, because there's some parts that we need to know what they are in order to do search terms and figure out how to build this airplane. The thing that I've understood about the Falcon is that there are no examples of it anymore. They just don't exist. They're not in museums, nothing. So there's really very limited documentation. So we have to understand what they are, what they do in order to build something for the airplane. So that being said, I'm going to put up a little picture and we're going to just keep going as I talk so that I'm not just a talking head. We have what is called different wires on a biplane. Okay, there's flying wires or guy wires. There's just lots of different types of wires. And with the different wires, you also have different struts. You have cabane struts, you have interplane struts, and they all play together in tension or support of the wings. The flying wires are defined as going from the bottom of the fuselage to the top of the wing. And this makes sense because all of the wires are under tension, not compression, right? So if you have an airplane wing that's giving lift, it's going to have tension on the tips, and you want to tie that tension into the fuselage at the fuselage base, right? Okay, so that makes sense. And then there are the landing wires, and the landing wires go from the top wing down to the bottom wing, but they go from the center of the top wing to the outer portion of the bottom wing. So that helps support the bottom wing under landing conditions so it doesn't like crack and break. Okay, so you have all of these forces that you're involved in lift, and like when you have maybe an abrupt or harsh landing, that all gets compensated for. Now, with these wires, okay, you have you have lots of different types of wires, but on the Curtis Falcon, because it's later in the golden era, it was very likely that they had, and I'm like 100% confident in this, that they had airfoiled style wires. So this is like not extruded, but it's like pulled, okay, pulled steel through a mold, and it creates a solid steel wire that's got an airfoil to it. At the end of each wire is, I mean, how it's terminated is up for debate. You're getting into a whole can of worms for full-scale aviation. But the point is that with these long runs of wires, you have lots of vibration. You have vibration from the engine, you have vibration from the wings, you have vibration from different air speeds on the wings. And with those different vibrations, you get different resonant frequencies all over the place. And these wires will vibrate like crazy. And in order to eliminate some of the fatigue on those wires, there is something called a javelin. Okay, a javelin. This is a new term to me. I did not know about this term. So a javelin is essentially a piece of wood. There's been some discussion that I've read that they should not be aluminum with any sort of padding or anything. They should be wood so that they help absorb some of the vibration. But these go from basically through the wires where they sort of cross. Okay, it follows the same parallel path as the fuselage, front to back. And what that does is it's sort of a midpoint on the wires to help dampen the vibrations and reduce the fatigue on these flying wires. So, and landing wires. So the cool thing is, getting back here to the bench, I have these sticks that just look like barbecue skewers that came in the box, okay? And I really didn't know what these sticks were until I was looking at some images of a scale model on Google, and then I was like, ah, I know what these are for. They're javelins. Okay, so I didn't know what they were called. Thank you, Adam Drain, for informing me, because I honestly did not know what they were called. I didn't know that there was a term for them. So we are on a mission to build javelins today, because these were just epoxied onto the steel. I have to be able to take this airplane apart. There's no other way to transport it. It's not going to stay assembled in my shop forever. That's just stupid. So I have to come up with a solution of getting this wood stick to stick to steel. And so I reached out to a friend of mine who just bought his own Boeing Stearman, which also has javelins. So he was able to send me some reference pictures, and we had a brief discussion about what he would do if he were to make scale javelins. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the bench, and we're going to get some equipment and supplies, and we're going to make javelins. So what we're starting off with basically is just some square balsa stock. Okay, why do we want square balsa stock? Well, because the notches that we have to make, we want to be able to easily manipulate this. We could start with round balsa, or basswood, I suppose, would be more robust. But again, I want balsa to see how this goes. I want it to be light, number one. But number two, I want it to be more easily shaped. So I have this 3D printed, really cool triangle stock tool. So it's got different inserts that you can put in for the different sizes of square stock, and you push it through and it makes triangle stock. So what we're going to do is we're going to make triangle stock and then some notches in that triangle to account for the flying or landing wires. And then we're going to sandwich this over top using O-rings. These are just nitrile O-rings, and you can pick these up at like any automotive store, okay? And we're going to use the O-rings over top of this to hold that sandwich of the triangles together. And then with that, we can then round out this whole thing once those notches are in. And then once the notches are in and it's all rounded out, we can do a test fit, see how it looks. And from there, then we can paint. We'll do some painting. And I don't have the exact same green because I have no idea what green this is. And they don't really match together anyway because they're all faded and gross and dirty. So I have something that is vaguely similar. So let's get started. We're going to put you on the tripod, and I'll let you see how I go about doing this. All right, to guide you guys through this time lapse, I'm marking off the spacing of the wires on the stick based off of the existing javelins. And then I cut the stick in half, and now I am going back and forth between the model and the bench with the file so that I can put those indentations for the wires themselves. I'm test fitting as I go to make sure I get the angle right. I don't want to overshoot, I don't want to undershoot. So that's what I'm doing here. And so now at this point I've got the O-rings just to hold the two halves together, and I'm sanding the stick round. Just knocking off the corners at first, and then do a final sanding. And then here I am doing a score mark with the knife, and then cutting a little ridge with the corner of the file. That way the O-rings have a place to seat into so they don't roll. And then yeah, I broke off an end of the stick here and just putting it back together. All right, so in a matter of 20 minutes, we have a javelin. So I just rounded out the tips. It's a rough shape, and let's go test fit it and see how it looks. Okay, so I apologize in advance for the lack of great lighting. It's a chore to get this thing outside, and it's kind of sunny out there. Anyway, so it's good enough light, I think, for you to get the idea. So this is the javelin that you just watched me make. And as you can see, there's a split, and that's why we needed to file the notches in the side. So there's really no top or bottom. It should just be able to either way, because any way you rotate it, there's going to be a left and a right because we're obviously symmetrical here. So if you go to put it on and the notches don't line up with the angle, then you know I have the wrong side. So you can also label the inside if you want. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with this. I want to see how it holds up. As you could see from the time lapse, I did break the tip off because I was getting a little heavy-handed. But I know how the process works, so if I can get some basswood triangle stock, I can rebuild them and make it a little bit stronger that way. I don't know. I'm really liking the ease of that and how scale it looks with some of the reference pictures that I've looked at with these. So next thing to do is to try to start up the engine and see how the vibrations look. Because I will note that I forget which side, but one of the front flying wires, it broke up at the solder joint, so I had to reflow that solder, and I think this is an actual functional part, which is why I wanted to get this done. So let's eventually get this outside and see if we can get a sense of the vibrations. Okay, so I got the airplane outside, it's running. So first I'm going to turn the camera around and show you the vibrations of the Javelins as best I can. I hope you can sort of hear me. All right, so with that out of the way, we're going to update you guys on what's going on with this airplane. What are all of the repairs and other things that I've been working on. So first and foremost, we'll start with that I replaced the prop. The prop is now a Zor prop, and I had to remove the cowl in order to retune the engine because the different prop has a different power profile. So needed to actually lean out the engine a little bit. So that is up to, I think it still could use a touch more adjustment. It's funny because with the intake on the carburetor right here on the side, there's obviously a different airflow profile with the engine running with the cowl on. So I think I may still need to lean that up a little bit more, which obviously means the cowl needs to come off again. Now, the the other thing is these screws. The green is a little bit off. Again, I don't have the right green, so I'm doing the best I can. But that said, it's just 6 screws to pull the cowl off, but you have to take off all 8 of the spitter screws, and then there are 6 more screws to take the prop off. So it's a little bit of a chore to take the cowl on and off. Now, the other thing that I have also done is obviously put the wires on. So with the wires on, yeah, I had to repair one. They still need a little bit of a cleaning, but I think some Mothers is doing a pretty good job. This is pretty well cleaned up now. Just a little bit of surface rust. Kind of hard to tell on this one, but there is some there. So the Mothers should clean up all of those. Let's see. Oh yeah, let's see. This cannon fell off. So the way these were epoxied on was just right over top of the paint. So smooth surface and epoxy don't mix. You have to have a mechanical bond too. So I roughed those up and got that re-epoxied on. Moving on from there, the strut was repaired, and the way that I repaired it was just some light CA to hold it in place, and then I drilled into it and inserted some metal pins using Gorilla Glue and let that cure out. So I can try to touch that up with a little bit of paint at some point, but I think I'm just going to leave that for now because it's a good story that's part of the process of this airplane. That being said, there are still little things here and in there to do. For example, this looks like contact cement is giving way on this sandpaper for the wing walk area. So need to see what I can do about that. But some of the details that you haven't really been able to see before, the rib stitching. So we've got pinked rib stitching as well as the individual ribs. So each one of these little bumps here that you see is the head of a pin, and it simulates the rib stitching that would hold the fabric to the wing rib very, very well. It's on the top and on the bottom wing, and it just looks fantastic. So there's that. I have put, there's a secondary panel in the cockpit that fell off. This mag switch had fallen off the panel, and the panel had fallen off entirely. So I've got that all glued back together. Of course, the other details are doing just fine for now. And then we have the rear gunner position. So all of this was reassembled. I used some new parts, and I think I still want to do some like rubber grommets to hold the guns better in position, but the vibrations are just too intense for this. It's going to fall apart. But I did get a new windshield cut. Some of this plastic showed up from Evergreen scale models, so I was able to do the framework. So there's that. Continuing on down below, I've got these masks for the right. So if you remember during the cleaning, this right lettering just came right up with soap and water. So I need to respray that. The black here is just vinyl. So the vinyl is in place. I'll tape off all of this and shoot some black paint so it's more permanent solution. It was like a paper before, just like these no step. I need to replace that too because that was like just paper. All right, so then moving on to the tail, again, more of the pinked rib stitching. Just absolutely beautiful finish. And let's see what more. So Jesus, it's hard to keep track of. Oh yes, on this side. So the side steps. So the way that the gunner would get into place is step on the rung with the left foot, step on the step with the right foot, left foot, and then climb in. Whereas the pilot would get up on the wing, step, and then get in. So these two steps were in pretty rough shape and they pulled right out, very loose. So I repainted them with some silver and then followed up with some black over top of that. And while the paint was still soft, just roughed it up so it looks like people actually step on it. So there's that, and those have been replaced. So yeah, another no step needs to be replaced there. It's really been a cleanup job, really. I mean, little bits of cleaning here and there. We've already talked about the wheels. We've talked about the tires. So I've been lubing that. If you look at the back, the centering of the elevator is wrong. It's got a little bit of pitch down moment on the elevator that I need to adjust mechanically. So that's a matter of opening up the tail and adjusting that. Not a huge deal. So I need to still replace the windshield. It's missing a piece of frame. It's chipped here. So I need to do that. I need to figure out how all of this comes apart. But yeah, this is like kind of jiggly, janky. And then I think one of the last things that I want to address is the navigation lights. So the navigation lights look like that, which is really cool. It's like a streamlined thing, and there's just a few of them. So here's the one on the right wing. It's clearly just like a piece of dowel that has some paint on it, and there's a pin pushing through it. I want to do something a little bit nicer, a little bit more permanent, because I feel like these are getting banged up and beat around. So yeah, that needs to be taken care of. But otherwise, the airplane looks really good. The CG, as best I can calculate, is essentially straight up from the leading edge of the bottom wing, which makes sense. That's typically how I balance my airplanes. And that means that the CG point is essentially right where the nav lights are. And I think that's intentional on behalf of the builder, so that you can have one person at one wing and one person on the other wing, and then you can pick it up and check the CG, because it's such a big model. But based off of holding the airplane, the CG is dead on. So the CG seems right, and that's with it dry. Obviously, adding some fuel to the front gives it a little more nose heavy. I will note, let's see, because if you're going to tip the nose forward, you got to have the prop right. So down underneath the horizontal stabilizer, there was still some additional cleaning I had to wrap up, so I've done that as well. Oh yeah, so this panel stitching. So this stuff is called rickrack. It's something that is used in fabric construction. It's pretty predominant in the 70s and 80s, starting to make a comeback. But that's what was used for the panel stitching all over the airplane. It's pretty cool, but I think we can do better. So I'm looking into different techniques to do there for that. Other than that, I still really don't have any solutions for pilots, but honestly, I haven't really looked that hard. What I really need to do at this point is focus on setting up the airplane and breaking it down. I need to get my trailer here and make sure that the airplane will fit in the trailer, because transport is something else that I need to solve. But I'm happy with the airplane as it is. I think it's a tremendous opportunity to share this wonderful piece of history, and I'm glad you guys are following along. I know this has been a lot to take in for this episode, but there's a lot of progress going on here, and I want to make sure that I share it accurately with you. So, all right, so there you have it. I appreciate you stopping by the workshop today. I hope you learned something, if only terminology. Sometimes having the right terms to search for is really key in getting something right. And being able to have a conversation with someone intelligently, I think, is something that's also beneficial in the long run. When you start talking to some of the full-scale aviation folks and start learning about how things actually work, being able to use the right terms that they are familiar with because they already know them, I think that's a great boon to you and what you can do as a scale builder. So until next time, guys, keep working on and learning about your flying works of art.